The auditorium went silent the second he finished. An 8-year-old black boy solved a math problem, untouched for a decade, in 10 seconds. But instead of applause, they gave him a certificate of participation. Behind closed doors, the judges whispered, "It's too fast, it doesn't look right." And then they deleted his win. But that's not even the most shocking part. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. He shattered the record, but the silence screamed louder than applause. The auditorium smelled faintly of lemon polish and old wood. It was the final round of the Tri-State Youth Math Olympiad, held annually at Ridgeberry Preparatory Academy, a private school that looked like it had been carved out of marble and money. Rows of students in pressed uniforms sat behind long white tables, each with a small digital timer and a clipboard. The audience, mostly white parents, teachers, and judges, watched from cushioned seats. At the center table sat an 8-year-old boy in a navy blue sweater vest, Elijah Rucker, the only black child in the room. He had already solved every question on the preliminary rounds, with speed and precision that unnerved the other contestants. The final problem, labeled Unsolved Challenge, was a math riddle that hadn't been cracked in 10 years. It wasn't required. It was optional. Symbolic, something placed at the end as a bonus to inspire older competitors. Elijah solved it in 10 seconds. Whispers traveled through the judges' row like wind rippling across wheat. Dr. Havers, the head adjudicator, leaned over his notes, then to his laptop, then back to Elijah's solution. He blinked. "Are we sure this is correct?" he whispered to the other judge. Elijah sat quietly, fingers folded, not smiling, not fidgeting, just waiting. His father, Darren Rucker, watched from the back row, hands clenched tightly in his lap. He didn't dare breathe. The host took the mic. "Well, looks like we have an answer?" The confusion in his voice wasn't masked. He glanced back at the judges, who were still whispering, double-checking, retyping Elijah's answer into a calculator like it was a typo. It wasn't. Elijah had used an unconventional but mathematically sound method, a shortcut buried in number theory, rarely taught to anyone under the age of 16. But he had learned it 3 years ago from a college textbook. Still, no one clapped. The auditorium remained frozen. One judge stood up, walked over to Elijah's desk, and asked him softly to show his work. Elijah pulled the rough paper from beneath his clipboard, calmly sliding it forward. "Where did you learn this?" the judge asked. "My dad teaches me," Elijah said simply. Murmurs again. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is it possible he memorized the answer beforehand?" Another leaned in. "Was there a leak? Did someone give him the question?" The moderator cleared his throat. "Let's give a round of applause for all our brilliant contestants." A polite clap emerged. Generic, soft, disconnected. It wasn't the standing ovation that typically followed an Olympiad record breaker. Darren stood halfway waiting to cheer, but noticed the looks. Not admiration, suspicion, resentment. He sat back down. When the ceremony ended, Elijah didn't get a trophy. He received a certificate of participation. The real award, they said, was still being reviewed due to procedural anomalies. Outside, as other parents snapped photos of their kids with judges and medals, Darren took Elijah's hand and walked silently toward the parking lot. "I think I broke the rule," Elijah said. "What rule, baby?" Darren asked, opening the car door. "I don't think I was supposed to win." Darren paused. It wasn't what Elijah said. It was how he said it. Calm, matter of fact, like a boy already learning to swallow disappointment as a condition of his brilliance. Inside the committee room, the judges argued. "It's too fast, that kind of speed. It doesn't make sense." Another replied, "But the math is correct, the logic's sound, the work is real." Dr. Havers shook his head. "It's not about correctness. It's about integrity. We have a responsibility to maintain credibility." "To whom?" the younger judge asked. The room went quiet. Elijah's test paper was taken into a private room and not returned. The judges agreed they would conduct a full review, citing irregularities. In their email to the Rucker family, they wrote, "Due to statistical outliers and procedural inconsistencies, we are unable to validate the score at this time." Darren posted the letter online. It spread like fire on Twitter, especially among black educators and parents. Screenshots of Elijah's work were shared side by side with advanced college math. Professors confirmed its accuracy. Former Olympiad winners weighed in. "If this were a white kid, He'd be on Ellen tomorrow. But it didn't stop the backlash. One parent emailed the committee, "I'm not racist, but it's clear this child must have had inside access. No 8-year-old can solve that problem legitimately. Let's protect the integrity of our program." Another message, unsigned, "This is why we have standards. It's not about race. It's about truth." At school, Elijah returned to his third-grade class without mention of the competition. No bulletin board announcement. No newsletter highlight. No Student of the Month ceremony. The principal said, "We don't want to create distractions or controversy." In class, he was given easier problems to solve. He started finishing his worksheets in 30 seconds, then 20, then 10. So the teacher began giving him spelling drills instead. During lunch, a classmate asked, "Did you cheat, Elijah?" "No," Elijah said. "My mom said you must have." "I didn't." "You talk weird. Like a robot." Elijah stopped sitting with anyone after that. Meanwhile, Darren contacted the Olympiad board again. No response. He emailed media outlets. No reply. He called 3 education journalists. Only one picked up and said they were already covering a story on standardized testing bias. So he tried something else. He built a website, ElijahRuckerMath.com. It included video clips of Elijah solving complex problems in real time, explanations of his methods, testimonials from teachers who had once recognized his talent. He called it proof of genius. And still, the silence. Until something unexpected happened. One of the judges leaked the committee's internal chat log. In it, Dr. Havers wrote, "Even if the score is real, we can't validate it. The optics are too risky." Another message, "This is exactly the kind of thing that makes us look soft on standards." The last entry, "Let's not turn this into a headline. Quiet retraction, no drama. He'll forget about it in a year." But Elijah wouldn't forget. And Darren refused to be quiet. The next morning, a reporter knocked on the Rutgers front door with a USB drive and a question. "Did you know this wasn't the first time a black student's win was erased by Ridgeberry?" Behind closed doors, a ruling was made that changed everything. The USB drive sat on the kitchen table like a piece of evidence in a trial no one had agreed to hold. Darren Rucker stared at it. Across from him, the journalist, Naomi Vickers, a young, sharp-eyed local reporter from an independent black-owned media outlet, sipped her coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to suggest seriousness. She didn't smile, didn't blink much either. "You should see what's on it," she said. "It's not just about Elijah. Ridgeberry's been running this pattern for years." Darren's hands shook slightly as he slid the drive into his laptop. Elijah, still in his pajamas, sat on the couch, working on a Rubik's Cube. His face blank, detached like he was trying not to exist too loudly. On the screen appeared a series of PDF documents, internal emails, memos, annotated score sheets with names scratched out. Most shocking were the notes from previous Olympiads. Black students, 2, possibly 3, whose scores had been marked pending but never certified. Their names didn't appear in official announcements. Their medals were delayed due to error. One memo read, "High probability of coaching interference. Review again after parent meeting." Another, "Exceptional score, but doesn't align with historical patterns. Escalate for reconsideration." Darren scrolled, jaw tightening. They were burying these kids. Systematically. Naomi nodded. And the judge who kept raising concerns. He was pushed out last year. Quietly. He lives 3 towns over. I interviewed him last month. Darren looked up. "Did he say why he left?" Naomi pulled a folded note from her bag and slid it across the table. Darren opened it. One sentence. "This must be a mistake. But it keeps happening." The judge's name was Thomas Clay, a retired mathematics professor who had volunteered on the Olympiad circuit for over a decade. Known for his integrity, he had a reputation for being fair, meticulous, and inconvenient. Naomi's voice dropped. Clay flagged Elijah's score immediately. Not because he doubted it, but because he knew what would happen next. "He told me he'd seen it before. Not the cheating. Not the lying. The erasing." Elijah looked up from his cube. "What's erasing?" Darren forced a smile. "Nothing you ever have to worry about again, champ." But inside, he wasn't sure. He hadn't been sure of anything since the moment they told him his son's math miracle was statistically inconsistent. In a quiet suburban house lined with bookshelves and dust-covered trophies, Thomas Clay sat alone at a kitchen table, flipping through his handwritten notes. A knock at the door broke his concentration. He opened it slowly. Darren stood on the porch, Elijah behind him. You don't know me, Darren said. But you knew my son. Clay stared for a moment, then motioned them in. Over tea, Clay laid it out plainly. Elijah's work was perfect. That shortcut he used. It's obscure, but it's legit. Most adults in the room didn't even recognize it, because they'd never studied that branch of modular arithmetic. But I had. I saw the elegance in what he did. Then why didn't you speak up? Darren asked. Clay looked tired. I tried. I argued in the judge's room. Said it was valid. Said the score should stand. But the others, they weren't just skeptical. They were afraid of backlash, of controversy, of setting precedent. Darren frowned. What kind of precedent? That black kids can be geniuses too. Clay shook his head. That black kids can be better. There it was. The quiet fear behind every microaggression. Not that Elijah had cheated, but that he hadn't. That his victory was legitimate, and that legitimacy posed a threat to assumptions, to traditions, to the illusion of superiority. I resigned 2 days after that meeting, Clay said. I couldn't stomach it anymore. He handed Darren a folder. Inside were copies of archived judge memos, dating back 5 years. 3 names were circled. One in particular stood out. Jameer West, age 9, 2018 Olympiad finalist. Score pending review. No further record. What happened to Jameer? Darren asked. Clay sighed. He never competed again. Family moved. No forwarding address. The pieces were falling into place. Elijah wasn't the first, just the latest. And maybe the last. At Ridgebury Academy, the headmaster, Mr. Langford, called an emergency meeting with the Olympiad committee. Tension hung in the air like humidity before a storm. The story's spreading, Langford said. That journalist leaked internal emails. Parents are calling. Alumni are posting screenshots. Dr. Havers spoke up. It'll pass. It's outrage culture. People forget. Langford wasn't so sure. We have a problem. A visible one. This boy, Elijah, has gone viral. People aren't forgetting. They're asking questions. One committee member said quietly. We should have just given him the damn trophy. Too late now. Langford tapped the table. We need a strategy. A distraction. Something to control the narrative. Do we have any leverage on the father? Nothing useful, someone said. Clean record. No legal drama. Runs a tutoring center. What about the boy's academic file? Anything we can question? Silent. Then someone muttered. He's too advanced. His IQ scores don't match his grade level. Langford raised an eyebrow. Could be worth exploring. Frame it as a psychological concern. Overexposure. Stress. We suggest the family step back for the child's well-being. That would be their angle. Protect the system. Discredit the anomaly. Darren received the call 2 days later. Mr. Rucker, this is Principal Mendez from Elkway Elementary. We'd like to schedule a meeting about Elijah's educational path. Why? Darren asked. Well, there are concerns he may be experiencing academic strain. Early burnout is common among gifted children, and we believe a temporary withdrawal from competitive activities might benefit his emotional development. Darren laughed. Is that what we're calling racism now? Burnout? Sir, I assure you. No, you don't, Darren snapped. You don't assure me of anything. He hung up. By evening, a formal recommendation letter had arrived by email. It read, in the interest of Elijah's mental and emotional health, we suggest an extended sabbatical from all accelerated programs, including math competitions, while we reassess his cognitive load. Elijah read it over his father's shoulder. They want me to stop learning? No, Darren said. They want you to stop shining. Elijah didn't cry. He went back to his cube, solved it, mixed it again, solved it faster. Naomi called. Darren, something's happened. What now? There's another student, a girl. She's 15, just came forward. Says her perfect score on a verbal reasoning test was flagged as anomaly because, quote, her dialect suggested coached language. What's her name? Talia Reed, Brooklyn. Darren sat down slowly. How many more are out there? Naomi paused. I think we're about to find out, because she wasn't the only one reaching out. Emails began flooding in. Parents, former students, coaches, one even from a teacher who claimed her principal instructed her not to over-nominate black students for gifted testing because it would skew the diversity metrics. By the end of the week, Naomi had compiled a list of 11 children whose academic achievements had been questioned, downgraded, or vanished entirely from records. Elijah's story had unlocked something larger, but the pressure was mounting. A legal letter arrived. Ridgeberry's board accused Darren of defamation and malicious misrepresentation of institutional process. They wanted the website taken down. He refused. Instead, he did the one thing they weren't prepared for. He challenged them, publicly. On a live-streamed video, Darren laid it all out. The withheld trophy, the erased records, the judge's resignation, the leaked messages. He ended with a challenge. Give my son his award. Or explain to America why you won't. The video exploded. Over 2 million views in 48 hours. And then, the Olympiad committee announced a press conference. Inside the press room, cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. Dr. Havers stepped up to the mic, flanked by Ridgeberry officials. We've completed our internal review of the Tri-State Youth Math Olympiad results. While we acknowledge that Mr. Elijah Rucker's solution was mathematically accurate, due to discrepancies in procedure, we cannot certify the score as officially valid. Gasps. Havers continued. This decision is final. Darren watched the feed from home. Fists clenched. Elijah stared blankly at the screen. No apology. No correction. No justice. But then something no one expected. The live feed cut suddenly. Then switched. A new speaker stepped up. Thomas Clay, microphone in hand. Standing outside the Ridgeberry gates with Naomi and a group of parents, he looked directly into the camera.
I was one of the judges, and I'm here to tell the truth. Clay pulled a folder from his coat.
Here are 10 years of buried scores. One of them proves Elijah wasn't the only genius they tried to silence. A routine school check turns into a humiliating interrogation.
Thomas Clay's voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what he held. 10 years of records. 10 years of silenced excellence. I was part of a system that told black children, in quiet ways, that they were never supposed to be exceptional. We didn't say it out loud. We used words like irregularities, too advanced, doesn't align with historical averages. We questioned brilliance when it came in black skin. The live stream caught every word. The internet was watching. So was Elijah. He looked up at his father, a flicker of confusion behind his eyes. Why would someone throw away scores like that? Darren knelt beside him, his jaw tight, because some people would rather erase your light than admit they've been living in shadows. The next morning, Elijah returned to school, not because Darren trusted them, but because he refused to let the system hide his son away in shame. But as they walked through the glass double doors of Elkway Elementary, the atmosphere had changed. The front office secretary barely looked up. The hallways were quieter, and when Elijah stepped into his third-grade classroom, he felt it instantly. Eyes. Not the curious kind. The kind that calculate, that look for cracks. Morning, Elijah. His teacher, Miss Carter, said with a tight smile. We're going to start the day with a short test. Nothing big, just a standard placement review. It wasn't standard. Not for anyone else. The test had 60 questions, many of them drawn from curricula 2 years ahead. The instructions were vague. Some parts contradicted others. It felt less like an evaluation, and more like a trap. Elijah finished in 15 minutes. Miss Carter raised an eyebrow. That was fast. It wasn't hard, Elijah replied. She took the paper. Didn't say thank you. By lunchtime, Darren's phone rang. This is Principal Mendez again, the voice said. We'd like you to come in. Today, if possible. Darren arrived within the hour. He wore a black blazer and calm fury on his face. Naomi had warned him, when a system feels threatened, it turns surveillance into subtle violence. He sat across from Mendez and the school psychologist, Dr. Evans, in the conference room with beige walls and motivational posters about potential. We're concerned, Mendez began. Elijah has shown unusual cognitive patterns, rapid processing, accelerated reasoning, traits that don't align with prior district benchmarks. What does that mean? Darren asked flatly. Dr. Evans interjected. We're not questioning his intelligence, but we believe it would be in Elijah's best interest to undergo a comprehensive psychological evaluation. Darren stared. Because he finished a test too fast? Because his profile doesn't align with typical developmental models, Evans said. He's not typical, Darren said. He's extraordinary. That's not a disorder. That's a gift. Mendez leaned forward. We just want to make sure he's not under any pressure to perform. Sometimes children internalize high expectations and begin to manipulate responses. There it was again, the quiet accusation. Darren's voice dropped. Are you saying my son is lying about how smart he is? No, Evans said. We're saying it's important to rule out factors like hyperlexia, memorization dependence, or academic coaching that mimics intelligence but doesn't reflect internal comprehension. Darren stood. You don't want to understand him. You want to discredit him. We're following protocol. Mendez began. No, Darren said. You're building a file. That afternoon, Elijah was called to the counselor's office. Alone. Dr. Evans sat him down, offered a juice box, then pulled out a packet labeled Cognitive Reasoning Diagnostics Supplemental. Let's play a game, he said. Some questions might seem silly. Just answer however you feel. The first questions were simple. Word associations, number sequences, then patterns, logic puzzles, abstract images. But halfway through, the tone shifted. Have you ever memorized an answer to make someone proud? Do you think being smart makes people like you more? Do you believe adults always understand you? Elijah hesitated. These aren't math questions. Dr. Evans smiled. They're still part of the test. He continued. Do you ever feel different from the other children in ways you can't explain? Do you ever pretend not to know something because people treat you strange when you do? Elijah paused longer this time. I don't pretend. Are you sure? That night, Elijah didn't talk much. He sat at the kitchen table, slowly turning the pages of his favorite math workbook, but not writing anything. Darren watched him. What happened at school? He asked. Elijah shrugged. They think I'm faking. They're wrong. I know, but his voice was thinner now, like his certainty was being sanded down. Darren called Naomi. They're building a psychological case, he said. They want to label him something, anything, to explain it away. Naomi said, I've seen this before, in New Jersey, in Atlanta. Genius becomes pathology when it doesn't fit the expected face. I'm not letting them put my boy in a box. You might not get a choice. 2 days later, Darren was summoned again, this time by the district office. Inside a carpeted boardroom, he was met by Mendez, Dr. Evans, and a new face, Dr. Rosalind Larch, the district's director of student evaluation. We've completed a preliminary file on Elijah, she said, based on faculty observations, testing patterns, and cognitive interviews. Darren clenched his jaw. Did you find out he's brilliant yet? She ignored the sarcasm. We're recommending an individualized support plan focused on emotional regulation and adaptive learning. We're also placing a temporary freeze on all external academic competitions pending full review. Darren blinked. A freeze? You mean he's banned? Not banned, just paused. Because he's too smart? Dr. Evans jumped in. Because when giftedness presents in uncommon ways, especially when paired with social withdrawal or rapid cycling focus, it raises flags. Darren leaned across the table. Tell me something, doctor. How many white students have you paused for being too advanced? The silence that followed was louder than any answer. He stood. This isn't about support, it's about containment. He turned and left. But the damage was already underway. The next day, Elijah was removed from enrichment classes. His name was taken off the student leaderboard. His teacher began calling on him less, saying, let's give someone else a chance. On the playground, 2 boys walked past him whispering, robot kid. Probably cheated. That's why he's not on the list anymore. Elijah stopped sitting at lunch, stopped raising his hand. He stopped solving the Rubik's Cube altogether. One night, Darren walked in and found him tearing up a math book. I don't want to be smart anymore, Elijah said. It doesn't make anything better. Darren knelt beside him. They're scared of what you are. That's not your fault. That's their weakness. But if I don't act smart, they'll leave me alone. Darren shook his head. You were born to shine, Elijah. And no one, no judge, no school, no title gets to put a ceiling on you. Tears welled in Elijah's eyes. I just wanted them to clap. And for a moment, Darren didn't know what to say. Because the truth was, so did he. Unexpectedly, a letter arrived. It was hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a single page. Written in blue ink were the words, they did it to me too. My name is Jameer West. It included a phone number and a city. Jameer was real, and he was reaching out. Darren picked up the phone, heart racing. On the 3rd ring, a voice answered. Mr. Rucker? I've been waiting for this call. There's something you need to see. something they erased from more than just paper. The father thought it was a meeting. It felt more like cross-examination. The phone call with Jameer West ran long into the night. Darren sat at the kitchen table, gripping a notepad filled with scribbles, arrows, and underlined names. Jameer's voice was calm but worn down. A boy who had once been a star student, now a young man speaking like someone who'd spent years climbing out of a hole he didn't dig. They erased my name from the Olympiad site. Took me off the state gifted list. Same excuse. Procedural error. My principal told my mom I probably plagiarized my answers from YouTube. I was 11. Darren felt his stomach turn. What happened after that? I got put in social emotional learning classes. Same test they gave your boy. They gave me. Said I was struggling with identity projection. All because I got too many answers right. Too fast. And then, they stopped recommending me for advanced programs. Said I was better off developing social skills. My mom pulled me out and homeschooled me after I stopped speaking in class. Took years to come back from that. Why didn't you go public? I tried. No one cared. Until now. The next day, Darren received a reminder email from Elkway Elementary. Parent-teacher night is scheduled for Thursday, 6:00 p.m. Attendance is required. We look forward to collaborating in support of Elijah's journey. He stared at the screen. Collaboration. After what they'd done, after the psychological probing, the false concern, the adaptive learning plan. Still, he decided to attend. Because silence was complicity. Thursday evening. The sun was setting behind the school's brick exterior. As Darren stepped through the entrance doors, Elijah's folder tucked under his arm like a shield. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered with artificial cheer, and volunteers handed out name tags and water bottles with school logos. He entered room 3B and took a seat in a child-sized plastic chair across from Miss Carter, Elijah's third-grade teacher. She didn't offer her hand. Instead, she looked over her glasses and said, "Let's get started." Darren gave a tight nod. She opened a folder with Elijah's name on it. "We've had a unique few weeks, haven't we?" Darren raised an eyebrow. Unique isn't the word I'd use. She flipped a page. Elijah remains ahead in math. Though we've noticed increasing social withdrawal, he's not engaging with peers. He's stopped participating in classroom discussion. That might be because you and your colleagues are treating his intelligence like a threat. Miss Carter didn't flinch. We're treating it with the caution it deserves. Sudden spikes in performance, especially when inconsistent with baseline assessments, demand scrutiny. Inconsistent? Darren asked. He's been solving complex math since he was 5. Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen. She leaned in. Mr. Rucker, are you sure Elijah didn't have access to the Olympiad materials in advance? The question landed like a slap. Darren sat up straighter. Did you just accuse my son of cheating? I'm asking, she said slowly, if it's possible he received outside coaching or advance copies. We had a report from a concerned parent, whose child was also in the competition. They claimed Elijah's answer was identical to a solution found on a Reddit thread. That solution was posted after the Olympiad. Well, she said, timelines can be tricky. Online content moves fast. Darren took a breath. Let me be clear. My son didn't cheat. He studies 3 hours a day, reads textbooks for fun, and practices equations before bed. He did what none of your students could do, and because of that, you've been trying to break him. Miss Carter's tone shifted. Cooler now. We're not trying to break anyone. We're trying to ensure fairness. The integrity of academic competition matters. If we let one anomaly pass unchecked, we open the door to chaos. One anomaly? Darren said, standing. You mean one black child? Before she could respond, another voice entered the room. Mr. Rucker. It was Principal Mendez, standing in the doorway. Can I speak with you privately? Darren followed him down the hall, past classrooms lined with artwork and college pennants. They entered the principal's office, where Dr. Evans was already seated. Another intervention? Darren asked, not sitting. Evans gestured to a folder. We've received a formal complaint. From whom? We can't disclose that. Let me guess, Darren said. A parent who can't believe a black kid is smarter than theirs. Mendez raised a hand. This isn't about race, Mr. Rucker. Everything is about race when the rules change the moment we win. Evans opened the folder. Inside were annotated copies of Elijah's Olympiad work, school tests and his psychological evaluation, marked up with highlights and notes. This is a paper trail, Darren said. You're building a case. We're doing our jobs, Mendez said. This meeting is just a formality. But Darren knew what it really was. It wasn't a meeting, it was a trial. The next morning, Elijah was pulled from class again. This time, it wasn't just Dr. Evans. The assistant superintendent, Ms. Holloway, was waiting. She had flown in from the district office. Tall, poised, with a practiced smile. "Elijah," she said gently, "we'd like to ask you a few questions." "It's okay, your teacher will be right outside." They sat in a small room lined with soft chairs and a fake plant. "Elijah," Holloway began, "can you tell me what happens when you solve problems so quickly? Do you ever feel like your brain is racing?" He shrugged. "Sometimes." "Do you feel like you're trying to be perfect?"
No.
"Do you think people expect too much from you?" Elijah's eyes narrowed. "I think they expect me to mess up." She smiled again. "No wrong answers here. This is just to help us understand." "But you already decided I did something wrong," he said quietly. "You just want me to say it." Holloway blinked. For a moment the rehearsed calm cracked. That evening Darren received a certified letter. It read, "Elijah Rucker will be placed on academic observation status. His competitive privileges are suspended until further notice. A third-party evaluator will be assigned to assess continued eligibility for advanced coursework." Buried beneath the legal language was one chilling truth. They had found a way to punish Elijah, without saying it was because of his race. They had made brilliance a liability. Naomi arrived at the Rucker home within the hour. "I've got something," she said. "I traced that Reddit post Miss Carter mentioned. It was created from an account that belongs to her nephew, a college math student." Darren's heart stopped. "You're saying she planted it? Or someone did, with her help?" "I can't prove collusion yet, but the timeline doesn't lie. That thread was posted after Elijah solved the problem, but they're using it to paint him as a cheater. This is sabotage." Naomi nodded. "Calculated, coordinated, and now it's personal." Darren looked at his son, who was sitting quietly in the living room, watching a nature documentary. His fingers moved slowly, absently drawing shapes in the carpet. He wasn't bouncing between problems, wasn't reciting pi, he was dimming, and Darren wouldn't let them finish the job. Naomi pulled out her phone.
You won't believe who just emailed me, a former Ridgeberry staff member. She has a recording from the night of the judges' meeting, and Elijah's name is on it.
One teacher tried to stand up, but what she uncovered went far deeper. Miss Carter never meant for this to go so far. She had walked into room 3B at Elkway Elementary thinking she was doing a job, teaching third-grade math. But somewhere along the way she'd become tangled in something she no longer believed in. The first time she noticed was when Elijah Rucker's answers began appearing before the textbooks were even opened. It was a Monday morning, bright outside but dull in the artificial light of the classroom. Elijah sat at the front. Miss Carter handed out new worksheets spanning concepts that weren't meant for third grade, and he absorbed them like he'd heard them before. Not the usual ahead for grade level that makes teachers proud. This was something else. Calm, unhurried mastery. She asked a simple question aloud. "Explain how you found the common denominator in the third problem." The room paused. Elijah raised his hand, his voice soft but sure. "I rewrote both fractions as equivalent statements. Because the prime factorization of 84 and 126 share 22223p7. So I chose 252, as it's the lowest common multiple." The other kids stared. Miss Carter collected the papers, looked at Elijah's with narrowing eyes, and then stared some more. She made a note in her digital gradebook. Exceptional performance, investigate background. Later that day she printed out his Olympiad score sheet and compared it to the school's records. The margin of his win was huge. The silence that followed his triumph hung in her mind like a challenge. Over the coming days Miss Carter began hearing whispers. In the teacher's lounge, "Too advanced, we'll have to stop his momentum." In the staff meeting whisper, "He's disruptive by being above expectations." At a training seminar, "We need kids who fit our curves, not ones who force us to rewrite them." She realized this was more than normal academic caution. It was a coordinated effort. One afternoon she sat down with the murmuring host of the Whisper Network, Ms. Dana Reynolds, the gifted program coordinator at the district level. Dana slumped into the small meeting table, as if exhausted. She confessed, "It happens all the time. A black kid jumps ahead, breaks our historic patterns. We can't let that go unchecked." Miss Carter's heart raced. "What do you mean, unchecked?" Dana looked around at the empty hallway. "Outside the glass door, we create what we call an academic funnel. It looks like support, but really it's containment. She flipped through a folder. We identify the outliers, the kids who solve problems too fast, the ones whose IQ doesn't match the grade level. We bring them into special cases, tests, psycho-ed evaluations, and quietly, we find ways to redirect them. Redirect them. Miss Carter felt her stomach drop. Redirect to what? Well, Dana said, to safer tracks, more social skills, general enrichment, nothing that threatens the system. Miss Carter slammed her coffee mug down on the table. That's discriminatory. Dana shrugged. We're still a public school system. We have quotas, we have expectations, and we measure by historical averages. When someone invalidates those, they disrupt everything. She paused. We call it protecting fairness. She paused again. It's not about race, but race is often the variable that triggers a flag. Miss Carter left the meeting shaken. That evening, she printed emails she'd overheard in the staff lounge. Focus on supporting Elijah's emotional well-being before his talents become a burden. Recommend disengagement from competitions for better balance. She recognized this language: burden, disengagement, support, as euphemisms used when the system wants to sideline someone too bright. She brought the evidence to Principal Mendez, who knocked her back quickly. At a brief meeting, he said, Miss Carter, I value you as a professional. But be careful about jumping to conclusions. There are valid concerns. Elijah's performance is exceptional. Yes, but we must consider the school's obligation to all children. His tone was firm. The veil slipped. We must manage expectations. She left the room with a heavy heart. She loved teaching. She believed in potential. But now she saw the machinery behind her classroom walls. Not long after, Miss Carter received a call from a woman introducing herself as an alumni donor to the school. She wanted to discuss diversity metrics and academic culture. The tone was polite but firm. Miss Carter, she said, we need children who represent the whole community. A student who steps out too far ahead impacts our image, our legacy of excellence, not always in a good way. Miss Carter understood. The image they protected wasn't achievement, it was comfort. That night, she sat at home, looking at Elijah's tests pinned to her fridge. She thought of the child she watched solve those equations before he even raised his hand. She thought of the message he got today. When you're born to shine, the system prefers you don't. The next morning at school, Miss Carter approached Elijah after class. Elijah, she said quietly, you're very smart, and I'm proud of you. His eyebrows rose. But she added, voice lowering, we need to make sure you're also wise about how you use your gift. He studied her for a moment. What does that mean? It means, she hesitated. Sometimes it's better to wait. Let your peers join. Let us lead you gently so no one thinks you're different. Elijah's face hardened. There was no insult in his voice, only observation. Is this about me being black? Miss Carter looked away. We all have different journeys, Elijah. Yours is just unique. But he already knew the truth. Meanwhile, Dana Reynolds proactively reached out to the district's communications team. She forwarded a memo suggesting Elijah's success be framed as team effort and school-wide growth, rather than genius kid wins. She recommended internal staff discussions be titled Supporting Exceptional Students Without Disrupting Equity Models. In other words, make the brilliance invisible. Ms. Carter watched this unfold. She saw how every email, memo, and meeting worked together to erode Elijah's visibility. That's when she made her decision. She compiled everything. Emails, audio logs from teacher lounge conversations she recorded, after secretly switching on her phone, screenshots of messages recommending suppression of Elijah's advanced placement. She formatted them into a folder, labeled Whistleblower Evidence, Elkway Elimination of Outliers. Late that night, she sent it to Naomi Vickers, the journalist working with Darren. Then she deleted the files from her computer and made sure no one could trace them back to her. The next morning, as Miss Carter walked into the staff lounge, she sensed the shift immediately. The chatter stopped. The air felt charged. No one greeted her. Cups of coffee were left untouched. The message was clear. She was now on the inside and the outside simultaneously. Later that day, she received a letter from the district. Notice of professional review. Your performance and interactions with students will now be evaluated quarterly. It didn't mention anything specific. It never needed to. The Whisper Network had spoken. At home, Darren put his arms around Elijah and said, I heard from a teacher today. Someone's trying to protect you from them. Elijah's eyes glowed, not with hope, but challenge. Maybe it's time they got protected from me. Darren smiled despite the weight. That's my boy. Miss Carter's folder landed on Naomi's desk. Naomi opened the first PDF and gasped. These are from Ridgebury, not Elkway, she said. Unexpected twist. The Whisper Network wasn't only operating at Elkway. It had roots in the elite circles of Ridgebury Preparatory Academy, the very institution that ran the Olympiad Elijah had aced. Miss Carter's documents revealed email chains between Ridgebury judges, Elkway administrators and district officials, quietly coordinating to monitor and sideline students who ran ahead of acceptable trajectories. Naomi looked at Darren. This is bigger than one child. It's a system. They both knew the next step would be dangerous. As night fell, Darren's phone buzzed with a video link. He watched it with Elijah by his side. On the screen, Miss Carter's hidden camera footage from a private Ridgebury meeting at the very moment the Olympiad panel discussed the Elijah Rucker problem. And one voice said quietly, "If we certify him, we open the floodgates." The dream school retracted its invitation, and no one would say why. The video from Miss Carter's hidden recording had already hit 1.3 million views in less than a day. It was raw, grainy, and shot through a small opening in a coat pocket. But the audio was crystal clear. If we certify him, we open the floodgates. What do we say when every parent demands their kid get the same label? We'd lose control of the standard, and of the narrative. He's not the kind of genius we're set up to celebrate. Darren watched it 3 times in a row, jaw tight, fist clenched. Elijah watched it once, then left the room silently. The world had now heard what Darren always knew. This wasn't about achievement. It was about containment. About who gets to be called exceptional. About who's allowed to rise, and who's quietly boxed in. Within 48 hours, interviews were being requested from national outlets. Civil rights organizations issued statements. The hashtag #NedElijahShine trended on Twitter. It wasn't just a story, it was a reckoning. But that same week, a letter arrived in the mail. A white envelope with gold embossing. The seal of Brightwater Academy, one of the top math and science academies in the country. Elijah had applied months ago under their early talent pipeline, and had received an informal offer 2 weeks before, the kind of offer that changes lives. Darren smiled when he saw the envelope, until he opened it. Dear Mr. Rucker, we regret to inform you that, upon further review of applicant materials and consultation with our admissions committee, we are unable to extend a formal invitation to Elijah Rucker at this time. We thank you for your interest in Brightwater Academy, and wish Elijah the best in his academic journey. Darren read it twice, then a third time. He checked the email thread. The original offer, signed by Brightwater's director Dean Lillian Brandt, was still there. The subject line, "We would be honored to welcome Elijah to our accelerated math program pending formal paperwork." But now the door was slammed shut. He called the admissions office. The receptionist answered with a robotic tone. "We're not authorized to discuss admissions decisions over the phone." "I'm not asking about the decision," Darren replied, voice steady. "I'm asking what changed between 'we would be honored' and 'we regret to inform.' Please direct any inquiries to our legal liaison via email." Click. He emailed. No reply. He tried calling again the next day. Same answer. So he forwarded the original offer to Naomi. Within hours, she tracked down a former admissions officer at Brightwater, Jenna Leary, who had recently left the academy under tense circumstances. Jenna agreed to speak anonymously. She confirmed what Darren feared. The committee was initially excited about Elijah, she said over a scrambled Zoom call. But then someone flagged him during the final vetting stage. Said there was increased risk of controversy due to recent online attention and possible academic irregularities. What irregularities? Naomi asked. They said there were allegations he cheated on a standardized test, that he was being reviewed by the district. It was presented like a red flag. Darren's mouth went dry. That's a lie. Jenna nodded. I believe you. But by the time I saw the file again, it had a new internal label. Do not pursue external complications. It was over. Who added that note? She hesitated. Can't say for sure, but I can tell you this. It didn't come from Brightwater originally. That kind of language comes from reputation management teams. Someone wanted him disqualified. Quietly, Darren leaned back in his chair. It wasn't just the school district anymore. It was a coordinated reputational takedown. The retraction hit Elijah hard. He didn't cry. He just shut down. For 2 days, he refused to open his textbooks, refused to do his practice problems. He turned his math posters around on the wall, so they faced away from him. Darren tried everything. Come on, champ, he said, setting down a logic puzzle. You used to race me with these. Elijah stared at the table. They don't want me to be smart. They can't stop you. They already did. Darren sat beside him, helpless. You're not wrong, Elijah. But what they're afraid of isn't your talent. It's your courage, your clarity, your confidence. Elijah's voice was quiet. I wish I didn't care so much. I don't, Darren said. Because caring is what makes you unstoppable. But even he could hear the ache in his own words. Naomi kept digging. She requested Elijah's full educational file through a public records request. What she received shocked even her. Multiple internal notes. Performance pattern inconsistent with prior assessments. Flagged for behavioral review due to lack of peer engagement. Needs emotional adjustment, recommend disqualification from high-intensity programs. Even more alarming, a private email chain between the Elkway principal, Ridgeberry administrators, and a representative from Brightwater's External Affairs Office. It read, in light of recent media controversy, we advise caution in associating the Brightwater brand with any subjects currently under public dispute, especially those involving academic credibility questions. Risk profile. The signature on that email? Lillian Brand, the same dean who had originally welcomed Elijah with open arms. The betrayal was complete. Darren knew what he had to do. He sat down and recorded a new video. This one wasn't angry. It was precise. He showed the original Brightwater email, the retraction, the anonymous testimony, the internal email connecting the dots between Ridgeberry and Brightwater's sudden reversal. Then he looked into the camera and said, my son is 8 years old. He's never lied, never cheated, never asked for anything other than the chance to be taken seriously. And for that, they've turned him into a liability. What does that say about the system we've built? If genius has to come with the right skin tone to be recognized, then what are we actually teaching our children? The video went viral again, but this time, it hit harder. Parents across the country began sharing similar stories. Quiet exclusions, sudden retractions, reclassifications based on fit. Civil rights groups stepped in. A petition began circulating to reinstate Elijah's offer and call for a review of Brightwater's admissions practices. It passed 100,000 signatures in 48 hours. Still, Brightwater remained silent until an anonymous leak dropped into Naomi's inbox. A single audio file. In it, Dean Brandt could be heard speaking during an internal meeting. We don't want another press scandal like the Harvard diversity case. If we admit the boy, it becomes a political symbol. We want scholars, not martyrs. Elijah's brilliance had become too dangerous, too visible, too black. That night, Darren opened an anonymous email. Attached was a document titled, The Blacklist Internal Notes on High-Risk Gifted Applicants. Elijah's name was number 3, and number 1 was someone Darren knew by name. A manipulated clip made him look like a fraud, and it spread like wildfire. Darren stared at the document titled, The Blacklist, Internal Notes on High-Risk Gifted Applicants. It looked like something out of a dystopian movie. Rows of names, scores, red flag summaries, and a color-coded column titled Visibility Risk. Elijah was number 3, but number 1, Talia Reed. Darren had seen the name before. She was the 15-year-old from Brooklyn who had reached out to Naomi weeks ago, claiming her perfect verbal reasoning test had been labeled inauthentic due to her urban dialect. Her school had accused her of parroting coached language, of performing intelligence. Her parents had fought back, but the system buried their appeals under administrative red tape. And now here she was, top of a literal blacklist. Darren's mind reeled. This wasn't just suspicion. It was policy. Quiet, covert, targeted policy, designed to suppress black excellence before it could challenge the comfort zones of institutional gatekeepers. He forwarded the file to Naomi with a note. Release it. No more waiting. She replied seconds later, already prepping the article. But brace yourself. Someone's trying to flip the story, and they're using Elijah to do it. Attached was a short, edited video making rounds on TikTok and YouTube. Darren clicked play. There was Elijah, sitting in a classroom, looking emotionless, blinking slowly, barely responding to a series of questions from Dr. Evans. The overlay text read, he memorized the answers. Watch how he shuts down when asked real questions. The captions were bold, the tone mocking. The comments beneath it were worse. This kid's a robot. Doesn't even talk like a real 8-year-old. Where's the proof he didn't cheat? Everyone's just making him a victim. Another woke sob story. Schools are right to be skeptical. The original video had been clipped from Elijah's mandated psychological evaluation weeks earlier, secretly recorded then cut down to make him look blank, evasive, robotic. They'd taken the trauma and spun it into guilt. Darren stood up so fast his chair hit the floor. He grabbed his phone, his voice trembling as he called Naomi. Where did they get that footage? I don't know yet, but it's being shared by 2 large education influencer accounts. One of them has ties to Brightwater's PR firm. Darren was quiet. I think this was strategic, Naomi added. They're trying to preempt the backlash from the blacklist leak. They want to paint Elijah as a fraud before the system gets exposed. He felt a rage deep in his chest. Not hot, but cold, focused, controlled. They won't erase him, Darren said. Not like this. But the damage had already begun. At school, Elijah felt the shift immediately. A group of older students snickered when he walked past. One leaned into another and whispered, loud enough for him to hear, "That's the robot kid from TikTok." In class, a substitute teacher asked to see his homework twice. Then once more after the bell. At lunch, no one sat near him. Even his closest friend Miles looked unsure. "Did they really put you on a list?" he asked. Elijah didn't know how to answer. He hadn't even watched the video. He just knew what it felt like to be turned into a headline he didn't write. That night, Darren sat at his desk, assembling the pieces. The audio of Ridgeberry's backroom meeting. The scholarship retraction. The edited interrogation footage. The blacklist. It wasn't just a school scandal anymore. It was a blueprint. A systemic method to preserve the illusion of fairness, while quietly gatekeeping access. And now that they were being exposed, they were going after the loudest evidence. Elijah. He checked his phone. New notification. Elijah Exposed was trending. He clicked it. More clips. More edits. More half-truths repackaged as doubt. Even a segment from a morning talk show, where a guest said, "We've seen this before. Parents coaching children to appear gifted. It's not abuse, but it's close. These kids break down eventually." Darren stood up and walked to Elijah's room. His son sat on the floor, cross-legged, surrounded by math books. He was doing nothing, just staring. Darren knelt beside him. "They're saying I'm fake," Elijah whispered. "They're wrong, but people believe it." Darren paused. "Some people will always believe lies that make them feel safe. But the truth has weight, Elijah. It lasts longer." Elijah looked at his father. "What if it doesn't matter anymore?" Darren hugged him tightly. "Then we make it matter." The next day, Naomi went public. She released the entire unedited evaluation footage, alongside an op-ed, How a Gifted 8-Year-Old Became a Threat to the System. In it, she showed the full session. Elijah calmly answering questions, even pausing to explain his reasoning. The robotic moments were simply gaps of thought, when any child might hesitate under pressure. She wrote, "This isn't a child shutting down. This is a child surviving interrogation. When we see black genius, we call it a glitch. When we see black calm, we call it coldness. When we see black excellence, we look for the string." The post went viral. Celebrities shared it. Academics weighed in. Professors from MIT, Stanford, and Yale offered public support for Elijah. One wrote, "I would have given my PhD to have half the intuition this child displays at age 8. But the tide wasn't entirely turning, because a new wave of videos emerged. Doctored images, fake transcripts. Someone even fabricated a screenshot of an email supposedly from Darren admitting to over-instructing Elijah to build a narrative. It was fake, but it spread. The public was now split. One side demanded justice. The other wanted Elijah to disappear. Then the twist. A former employee from Procore Strategies, the PR firm hired by Ridgeberry, leaked documents to Naomi. The firm had been paid $112,000 to manage the reputational fallout related to Ridgeberry's Olympiad decisions. The plan included discrediting Elijah using carefully edited media, elevating counter-narratives on social platforms, linking Elijah to tiger parenting and overcoaching stories, feeding exclusive interviews to select influencers in exchange for downplaying systemic bias. They weren't just reacting to the story, they were manufacturing its collapse. Naomi called Darren immediately. "We need to go bigger," she said. "They're using corporate crisis strategy to destroy your son's name. We can't just defend. We have to expose." Darren agreed, but they needed a platform. So they went to 60 Minutes, and 60 Minutes said yes. The interview was taped 2 days later. Elijah sat next to Darren in a blue sweater and jeans. Calm, quiet, collected. The interviewer leaned forward. What do you say to people who think you're not really gifted? Elijah looked at the camera. I don't solve problems to prove anything. I solve them because I love how they work. And if that scares people, then maybe the problem isn't me. The interviewer turned to Darren. What's been the hardest part? He exhaled, watching the light in my son dim, not because he failed, but because too many adults couldn't accept that he succeeded. The segment aired nationwide. The backlash to the backlash was immediate. Parents, educators, scientists, everyone began asking the same thing. If this is how we treat genius when it's black, how many others have we lost? Ridgeberry released a statement. Cold, non-apologetic. Brightwater said nothing. Elkway suspended Ms. Carter. Naomi's website was hit with a denial of service attack the next day. They were fighting back, but so was the truth. Naomi received a new email. Subject line, I worked at Brightwater. I know what happened to Talia Reid. I have the footage they buried. Her open plea went viral, but then the death threats started. The email arrived at 2:46. Subject, I worked at Brightwater. I know what happened to Talia Reid. I have the footage they buried. Naomi's eyes scanned the message over and over again, as if reading it faster might unlock its secrets. The sender used an alias, Truth in Glass, but the signature line hidden in the email header's metadata revealed the name Camille Ortega. She'd been a student advisor at Brightwater until 9 months ago. Quietly dismissed, no public explanation. The file attached was a video, time-stamped 4 years earlier. Naomi opened it. The footage showed a girl, Talia Reid, standing in front of a whiteboard. She looked confident, proud. A panel of Brightwater staff sat across from her. They gave her a complex logic sequence to solve. She walked through it in under 90 seconds, her voice clear and unshaken. One of the judges raised an eyebrow. The head of the panel, a woman in a navy blazer, Naomi recognized as Dean Lillian Brandt, smiled thinly and said, That was surprising. Can you do it again using a different approach? Talia did. Faster. Cleaner. The panel remained stone-faced. Brandt leaned in. Where did you learn to speak like that? The video cut off right after. Naomi sat frozen. Not at the answer, but the question. Not how did you solve this, but where did you learn to sound like us? She forwarded the video to Darren. Within minutes, her phone rang. This is it, he said. This isn't just about Elijah anymore. Elijah's mother, Monique Rucker, had stayed in the background through most of the media storm. It wasn't because she was silent. It was because she was tired. Tired of being asked to prove that her son deserved dignity. Tired of filtering rage into respectable words. Tired of pretending that grace was always the answer. But when the edited video of Elijah's evaluation went viral, and when the mainstream narrative briefly turned against her child, she broke that silence. She opened her laptop and wrote. The result was a letter titled, My Son Is Not Your Punchline. She didn't write it as a press release, or a legal statement, or a polished op-ed. She wrote it like a mother, raw, honest, unflinching. I did not raise a prop. I did not raise a viral clip. I raised a child. A child who once asked me why numbers feel like music. A child who learned to count backwards before he could tie his shoes. A child who smiles when he solves problems, and cries when he's told those solutions make people uncomfortable. You took that child and turned him into content. You edited his brilliance into awkward silence and called it dishonesty. You questioned his joy because it didn't look like yours. You called him robotic for being precise, arrogant for being prepared, dangerous for being excellent. You looked at my black son and decided that genius didn't belong in his skin. Well, here's what I need you to hear. He's not a fraud, he's not a token, and he damn sure isn't your punchline. Monique posted the letter on a blog with fewer than 300 followers. By noon, it had over 5 million views. By nightfall, it had been translated into 7 languages and read aloud by anchors on 2 major networks. Teachers cried reading it on TikTok. Mothers reposted it with their own stories of sons and daughters ignored, misjudged, or erased. Students wrote essays about it. A high school debate team used it in a final round rebuttal. One professor assigned it in her African American literature class under the heading Contemporary Resistance Narratives. It was everywhere. But so was the backlash. That evening, Monique received the first email. You people always play the victim. Then the second. Keep your kid out of our schools if you can't follow the rules. Then, worse. An anonymous Twitter account doxed her address, She received an envelope in the mail with the words, "You're not special. You're next." Elijah's face was printed on the back of a cereal box in a meme that read, "Now serving pity flakes, limited black edition." She filed reports. She blocked accounts. She told Elijah it was just noise, but at night she triple-checked the locks. She unplugged the TV. She stared at the dark ceiling and thought, "They didn't just erase my son's victory. They tried to rewrite his humanity." Darren wanted to take the letter down. "It's too much," he said. "You're the new target now." Monique refused. "They've already painted us as manipulators. Let them see the mother they tried to break." Elijah, for his part, didn't say much. Until one morning, he came downstairs holding a notebook. On the first page, he'd written something. "They thought I'd get quieter, but I've been learning how to speak." He looked at his mom. "Can we write something together?" That evening, the two of them sat at the kitchen table. Elijah dictated. Monique typed. They titled it, "What Genius Feels Like at 8 Years Old." In it, Elijah described the quiet click of a math problem locking into place. The loneliness of recess. The ache of being called too smart to be real. The fear of being asked to slow down for other people's comfort. And the relief of being seen fully, without skepticism. It was posted as a companion to Monique's letter. It went viral too. A black child, speaking his own truth, in his own words. It was harder to twist, harder to clip, harder to ignore. And for a moment, it felt like the tide was turning for real. Until the threats came back. This time, to Elijah. An email, anonymous. A screenshot of a gun. No words. An Instagram comment. "Play Genius again, and see what happens." A package on their doorstep. No sender, inside a black hoodie with "Gifted" printed on it. And slashes through the letters with red marker. The message was clear. You don't get to be brilliant and black and unafraid. Pick 2. Naomi contacted the FBI. They launched an investigation into the threats. But the Ruckers couldn't sleep. Elijah started waking up in the middle of the night, checking the window. He stopped walking to school. He carried a flashlight everywhere, even during the day. The trauma wasn't hypothetical anymore. It had become the air they breathed. Darren installed a security system. Monique kept a baseball bat by the bed. And still, the fear lingered. Not because they were weak, but because they'd become a symbol. And America has a history of turning symbols into sacrifices. Then something unexpected happened. A copy of Monique's letter was read aloud at a protest in front of Brightwater Academy. Not by a student, not by an activist, but by Camille Ortega, the former student advisor who had leaked Talia Reid's footage. She stood on the steps of the school, surrounded by signs that read, "Genius doesn't come in one color, and Elijah is all of us." Her voice cracked as she finished Monique's final paragraph. "I will not apologize for raising a child who shines. I will not explain away his brilliance to protect your comfort. I will not let you make him smaller just to make the world easier to explain." The crowd erupted, and Camille added her own words. "You don't get to love black culture and fear black genius. You don't get to borrow our style and erase our minds." The next day, 5 more former staffers from Ridgebury and Brightwater came forward. One of them, an IT director, revealed the existence of a second blacklist. This one wasn't just names. It had full profile, surveillance reports, internal memos about family backgrounds, judgments about clothing, tone, and media volatility. It read like a dossier compiled, not for education, but for control. Elijah's file had been updated 3 times. Last tag, escalated risk. PR hostile. Inside the newly leaked folder, Naomi found a document titled Neutralization Strategies for High-Profile Youth Disruptors. At the top of the list, stage a public failure. Destroy the myth before it spreads. A whistleblower leaks a list, and his name was never even on it. The document titled Neutralization Strategies for High-Profile Youth Disruptors wasn't just damning, it was surgical. A blueprint for erasing brilliance before it could spark revolution. Naomi stared at the screen, disbelief tangled with rage. The opening paragraph laid it bare. Early intervention is critical when students gain excessive media visibility. Standard procedures must be bypassed in favor of proactive narrative containment. This includes academic review, psychological flagging, media counter-messaging, and if necessary, controlled public failure. Then came the bullet points. Insert doubt early. Question methodology before mastery is acknowledged. Frame achievements as parental coaching or memorization. If backlash grows, Leak incomplete records to diminish legitimacy. Avoid direct racism. Language must be coded concerning patterns, unverified sources, emotional strain. And the final directive: all interventions should appear as concern for the student's well-being. Optics are everything. At the bottom was a signature: C. Havers. Naomi's stomach dropped. That was Dr. Charles Havers, the head adjudicator of the Tri-State Youth Math Olympiad. The same man who sat on the stage, expression flat when Elijah solved the impossible in 10 seconds. The same man who told the press the score couldn't be certified due to procedural concerns. He hadn't just disbelieved Elijah. He'd helped engineer his erasure. Naomi published the exposé within the hour. Leaked playbook reveals systemic suppression of black youth genius. Within minutes it was trending. But while the public reeled, the Rucker family faced a new blow. An anonymous email landed in Darren's inbox. Subject: Genius Selection Panel. Internal only. It contained a spreadsheet, bland at first glance. Columns of names, test scores, district IDs. But the header gave it weight. 2024 National Genius Watchlist. Pre-admittance pool. This was it. The master list. The one used to pre-select students for elite math, science, and leadership programs, long before formal competitions were held. The document outlined regional recommendations, flagged mentorship candidates, and even detailed preferred family backgrounds. There was a column titled Legacy Fit, and another, Institutional Compatibility. It read more like an exclusive country club admission roster than an academic shortlist. Darren scrolled, scanning names, page after page. No Elijah, not even a placeholder. Yet on the list were children with lower scores than Elijah. Children from Ridgebury and other elite academies. Kids whose parents sat on boards, donated to schools, or held district titles. And then he saw it. Talia Reed's name. But it was crossed out. Next to it, removed. Demeanor inconsistent with leadership model. He scrolled further and saw another name he recognized. Jaden Ellis, son of a state senator. He'd placed third in the same Olympiad Elijah had won, but he was listed as a top-tier talent. Darren stared at the screen. The truth was clearer than ever. Genius wasn't just tested, it was chosen. Naomi reached out to her source again. This time, they responded with a burner phone number and a request: meet in person. The next day, she met the whistleblower at a quiet coffee shop off route. He wore a gray hoodie, cap low, mid-40s, sharp eyes, a nervous posture. His name was Malik Grayson, a data analyst contracted to assist in building predictive modeling for national gifted programs. He'd been hired by a third-party consulting firm that worked with elite prep schools and state education departments. I started noticing patterns, he said quietly. The algorithm wasn't neutral. It had baked in assumptions, variables that penalize students for things like verbal assertiveness, non-traditional family structures, and lack of institutional affiliation.
What does that mean? Naomi asked.
It means if a kid's parents didn't attend certain schools, or if they spoke with certain accents, or if they were homeschooled, they were weighted lower, even if their scores were perfect. And race? He nodded. Not directly, but correlated variables. Zip code, family composition, education background, did the same work. Naomi leaned in. And Elijah? Grayson shook his head. Never made it into the candidate pool. The system was set to overlook him before he even started. She stared at him. So he was erased before he ever had a chance to be seen. Exactly. Naomi sat back, breath shallow. This wasn't just injustice. It was infrastructure. Back in Elkway, Elijah sat in his room, staring at the Genius watch list on his dad's laptop. He looked up slowly. They never planned to let me in. Darren's heart ached. No, son, they didn't. Elijah whispered. But I still beat them. You did. They just didn't clap. Darren nodded. That's not on you. For a moment the boy's eyes lit with something deeper than sadness. Clarity. They're scared of kids like me, he said. Yeah, Darren replied. Because you don't just answer questions. You force new ones. The Genius watchlist leak rocked the academic world. Lawyers weighed in. Civil rights advocates demanded investigations. Parents in privileged districts scrambled to explain why their kids were marked as pre-qualified for awards they hadn't yet earned. The Department of Education issued a statement. We are reviewing all affiliated programs and third-party consulting contracts to ensure compliance with equity standards. But behind closed doors, the damage control intensified. Ridgebury released a public letter stating, We have never participated in any discriminatory academic selection process. Any such implication is both false and defamatory. Naomi responded with receipts. She published internal communications showing Ridgebury admissions staff directly contributing student evaluations to the Genius Watchlist's data pool. Notes like, child has potential but lacks social capital, family from a high-risk media demographic, monitor for compliance before public visibility. The fallout was fast. 3 Ridgebury officials resigned. Dean Lillian Brandt went on temporary leave. Yet still, no apology to Elijah, no reinstated trophy, no open door. Then, another twist. The Ruckers received an unexpected invitation from the Orion Institute, an independent invite-only academic organization known for supporting underrepresented prodigies. It read, "We do not judge talent by lineage or optics. We've watched your son. We believe he's not only gifted, but needed. Let us help him reclaim what was stolen." Darren hesitated. So did Monique, because this time, they knew better than to trust quickly. But Elijah? He smiled for the first time in days. "I want to go where they see me," he said. That night, Darren recorded a video. It was simple. He sat at his desk, eyes tired but fierce. He held up the watch list, then Elijah's Olympiad paper, then Monique's letter, and finally, he looked into the camera. This isn't just about Elijah. It's about every child who was told excellence needs permission. It doesn't. It's about every list we were never allowed on. Every door we were told was too heavy. Every clap that never came. We don't need their titles. We're building our own. He closed the video with one sentence. You didn't reject him. You revealed yourselves. The clip was shared over 20 million times. The Genius watch list was shut down, but the questions it raised were just beginning. Late that night, Naomi received a package with no return address. Inside, a red USB drive. A note attached. The trophies were never real. But this file will break the board. He cried for his mom as the whole neighborhood watched in silence. Naomi turned the red USB drive over in her hand. It had no markings, no label, no origin, just a slip of paper attached with 5 handwritten words. The trophies were never real, and a second line chilling, cryptic, and clear. But this file will break the board. She inserted it into her laptop, pulse rising. Inside were dozens of folders, hidden behind layers of encryption she cracked only with the help of a coder she trusted. Once inside, what she found made her gasp. Meeting minutes, audio files, internal memos from Ridgebury's Olympiad board dating back a decade. Every trophy awarded, every disqualification, every reviewed case, cataloged, tracked, and in many cases, manipulated. The metadata revealed edits made after competition results were finalized. It was a cover-up, years deep. And Elijah's name? It wasn't just absent from the winners list. It was manually deleted by Dr. Havers himself, after the scoring committee had already approved it. The truth was darker than expected. Elijah didn't fail to win. He won, and was then erased. But as Naomi prepared to go public, her phone buzzed. A breaking alert. Breaking. 8-year-old math prodigy Elijah Rucker detained by police at local playground. The image showed Elijah face down in the grass, hands behind his back, an officer's knee hovering close to his shoulder. Monique's face turned white. She dropped her coffee and bolted for the door. It had started as a peaceful afternoon. Monique had taken Elijah to Maple Crest Park, a small neighborhood green space they'd visited countless times. After weeks of cameras, headlines, and harsh whispers, Elijah had asked to feel normal again. "I just want to play," he said. So she packed juice boxes, a soccer ball, his Rubik's Cube, and they went. For a while, everything was calm. Elijah climbed the jungle gym, swung across the monkey bars, laughed with 2 boys from a nearby church camp. Then a girl, a white girl, about 10, came over holding a handful of plastic counters. They were playing a math game, counting objects, tossing answers back and forth. Elijah corrected one of her answers gently. "No, the least common multiple of 8 and 6 is 24, not 16, he said. She frowned. Then he muttered, barely audible, "That's not even close." She misheard him, thought he said. "That stupid girl's slow." She flinched, then ran. 10 minutes later, a security guard approached Monique. "Ma'am, we had a complaint. A child claims your son used derogatory language." Monique stood, confused. "What?" Elijah wouldn't. But then 2 police cruisers pulled up. Lights off. 4 officers stepped out. calm but cold. One walked directly toward Elijah, who was sitting on a bench, legs crossed, twisting his cube. You Elijah Rucker? Elijah looked up. Yeah. We need you to come with us for a minute. Monique stepped between them. Hold on. What's going on? One officer held up a report slip. We received a 911 call, claiming your son verbally harassed another child and made threatening remarks. Threatening? Monique repeated. He's 8. We're following procedure, ma'am. Step aside. He's a child, not a suspect. The officers closed in. Elijah backed up, hands shaking. Please don't touch me, he whispered. But one officer reached for him anyway. Elijah flinched, and that's all it took. He was spun around, pulled to the grass. Handcuffs clicked too loud for a playground. Children screamed. Parents stared. Phones came out. No one moved.
No one stopped it.
Monique screamed. You're traumatizing my child. He didn't do anything. The officer replied, stone-faced. Then he has nothing to worry about. Elijah cried for his mom, and the neighborhood watched in silence. Back at the station, they kept Elijah in a side room for nearly an hour before even beginning paperwork. The charge? Verbal intimidation with perceived bias intent. A discretionary category, filed under a new local ordinance meant to address harassment in youth spaces. But no witness confirmed it. No recording supported it. The girl's family didn't even file a complaint. They just called the police. Darren arrived in a fury, legal counsel in tow. This ends now, he told the officers. But the trauma was done. Elijah sat in the corner, arms wrapped around his knees. Not speaking, just shaking. The footage hit social media within hours. Elijah's small body, pressed against the dirt. The handcuffs clinking. The look of betrayal on his face. It wasn't just viral. It was nuclear. Even those who had once doubted his genius now saw the truth. This child is being punished for being visible. Across America, protests reignited. He solved math problems, not crimes. Let Elijah play. From gifted to profiled. But amidst the outrage came a new wave of attacks. Commenters claimed Elijah fit the pattern. An arrogant kid with robotic tendencies and tone issues. One op-ed asked, is there such a thing as too precocious? Another headline read, gifted but difficult. It was coded racism draped in academic language. Naomi wrote back hard. Difficult is what we call black children who don't apologize for their excellence. Precocious is what we praise, until it makes us uncomfortable. Genius, when it's black, is treated like a threat until proven humble. But nothing reversed what happened that day at the playground. Monique held Elijah through the night. He didn't speak, didn't solve, didn't sleep. Darren sat on the couch, staring at the USB. The trophies were never real, he said.
Monique nodded, voice cracked. But the scars are.
In the following days, Naomi released the full Ridgeberry audit from the USB. The Olympiad board was forced to resign. Federal inquiries were opened. And yet, Brightwater remained silent. The media began to move on, until one voice brought it back. Elijah. He stepped in front of a mic at a community rally. His voice was soft, slow, deliberate. I'm not here to prove anything anymore. Not to win. Not to get claps. I'm here because I was playing math at a park, and someone thought it sounded like a threat. I'm here because you think I'm too smart to be kind, too young to be right, too black to be safe. But I'm not going anywhere. He paused. I used to solve problems for fun. Now I solve them because I don't want any other kid to feel like this. It silenced the crowd, because it was the one voice they hadn't truly listened to yet. His own. As Elijah stepped down, Naomi received a text. A private video link, caption Brightwater never wanted him, because they were hiding something bigger. Watch this. Cameras rolled as he was forced to defend his own intelligence. The video Naomi received was unlisted, time-stamped and watermarked. Brightwater internal review. Confidential. It showed a closed-door staff meeting. Seated at the head of the table was Dean Lillian Brandt. Around her sat Brightwater's legal advisor, 2 board members, and a consultant from Procore Strategies, the same PR firm that coordinated the media backlash against Elijah. The conversation was grim. Dean Brandt said, we need to be careful. If this boy is admitted, he becomes a benchmark for every underrepresented child we've ever disqualified. That opens the floodgates, not just for admissions, but for accountability. A board member replied, what are we really afraid of here? A gifted child or the precedent his acceptance sets? Brant didn't flinch. Both. The video ended. It confirmed everything Elijah's family had feared. His rejection wasn't about fit. It was about precedent. About fear. The system wasn't built to acknowledge a child like Elijah. But now it was being forced to. The House Subcommittee on Education and Civil Rights opened hearings within a week. The topic: academic bias, giftedness, and the invisible gatekeeping of opportunity. Elijah Rucker's name was first on the witness list. The decision to testify had not come easy. Darren and Monique went back and forth for days. The pressure, the exposure, the trauma of putting their son back under a national spotlight. But Elijah decided for himself. "I don't want to just win something," he said. "I want to say something." And so 1 week later, the boy who had solved the Olympiad's unsolvable problem sat in a pressed gray suit in front of Congress, a name tag reading, Elijah Rucker, student, clipped to his chest. Cameras rolled. America watched. A congresswoman leaned forward. "Elijah, thank you for being here. We know this hasn't been easy. Can you tell us what it's like to be told you're gifted, and then told you're wrong?" Elijah looked down at his lap. Then up. "I never told myself I was gifted. I just liked questions. And I liked finding answers." He paused. "But every time I answered too fast, or used a word someone didn't expect, or talked about math like it was a language, I saw people look at me like I was cheating, like I was pretending, like I couldn't be real." A low murmur passed through the room. Another representative asked, "Elijah, what would you say to the adults who believed you were coached, or robotic, or dishonest?" He took a breath. "I'd say maybe their idea of smart doesn't look like me. But that's not my fault. That's their mirror." Gasps. Audible ones. Naomi, sitting with Monique in the gallery, wiped her eyes. This wasn't just a boy defending his intelligence. It was a child reclaiming his voice.
Next came Darren.
He walked into the chamber with a folder under his arm. Elijah's test scores, the Ridgeberry memos, the redacted email chains, the neutralization strategy documents. But he didn't hold them up. He just spoke. "Do you know what it feels like," he said, "to tell your black son every day that he can be anything, only to watch the world clip his wings before he learns how to fly?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He wasn't erased because he was wrong. He was erased because he was undeniable. And that scared you. The silence was deafening. Even the committee chair sat back, stunned. Monique was next. She didn't bring documents. She brought her pain. "I watched my child go from celebrated to handcuffed in less than a month. From being called brilliant to being called dangerous. And no matter how many credentials we carry, how many degrees, how many petitions, we still weren't enough to protect his peace." She stopped, looked directly at the committee. "My son is not exceptional because he's gifted. He's exceptional because he still believes in this country enough to sit here and speak." But the most devastating moment came when the committee played the now viral footage from Maple Crest Park. The image of Elijah's small body pressed to the ground, the handcuffs, the cry for his mother. The video played with no narration, just raw silence. And in that silence, something shifted. Because the room wasn't just witnessing injustice, it was witnessing endurance. After the testimonies, a panel of educators and psychologists spoke. Some defended the current systems, citing the need for rigorous vetting and high-stakes programs. But others, black educators, whistleblowers, even former Ridgeberry staff, told the truth. One said, "We have created a meritocracy that rewards proximity to whiteness more than actual merit." Another added, "Giftedness should not be a mirror. It should be a window." The closing question came from a skeptical representative. "Elijah, what would you like to see change?" Elijah looked directly into the camera. "Make the gate wider. Forward." But they cracked something wide open. Not just in the chamber, but in the country. Within 40, Ridgeberry's board was dissolved. Brightwater's Dean Brant resigned. Elkway Elementary was placed under federal review. A new task force was announced to oversee equity in gifted admissions across all 50 states. But even with the victories, the trauma lingered. Online, the smear campaigns ramped up again. New conspiracy theories emerged. More fake documents, more doctored video. But this time, they didn't land the same. Because Elijah had spoken, and the world had listened. As the hearing ended, and the cameras shut off, Naomi received a final encrypted file from her original whistleblower. Subject line: "This is what they fear the most. It's not Elijah's genius. It's what he might build next." He opened his inbox and found proof that stunned the courtroom. The final encrypted file from Naomi's whistleblower wasn't large. It held just 2 documents. One was a scanned PDF titled, Private Correspondence, Dr. Havers, Ridgebury Olympiad Committee. The second was a forwarded email chain from an unfamiliar domain. Holmes@MathTruth. It took Naomi only moments to understand the significance. Dr. Everett Holmes, a tenured professor of mathematics at Western Tech University. Low profile, but widely respected in academic circles for his work in abstract number theory and his advocacy for inclusive pedagogy in STEM. The email read simply, I can no longer watch this in silence. The child is correct. The math is real. The erasure is intentional. Attached unpublished analysis, timeline and original committee vote before it was altered. In a quiet office lined with chalkboard walls and math journals stacked in lopsided towers, Dr. Holmes stared at his inbox, still unsure whether sending that file had sealed his career's fate. He had sat silently through every twist of Elijah Rucker's ordeal, first as a passive observer, then as a haunted participant. Because what few knew was this. Holmes had been a shadow advisor to the Ridgebury Olympiad Committee. Each year, he reviewed the final challenge problems before they were published. His name never appeared on public records by design. It protected the objectivity of the scoring board, but it also shielded complicity. And this time, it was personal. Because when Elijah submitted his solution using a deeply unconventional method, a variation on the Mobius inversion formula, adjusted for base 9 modularity, Holmes had recognized the approach instantly. He'd written about it himself, in a 2006 white paper dismissed by most traditionalists. And this 8-year-old had solved it. In 10 seconds. Holmes had voted yes to certify Elijah's win. So had 2 others. But that vote was never recorded. He'd searched for the published record later, and found it missing. In its place, a clean spreadsheet showing Elijah's entry, as unverified, and all references to his final problem. Scrub. Holmes had called Havers directly. You edited the results. Havers replied coldly. We reclassified them. The boy is an outlier. We don't validate statistical noise. Holmes knew then he had to choose. Career or conscience. The congressional hearing opened a legal inquiry. A motion was filed to investigate the Tri-State Olympiad Board for potential academic misconduct and civil rights violations. Dr. Holmes was subpoenaed to appear in court. The decision sent tremors through the university. Western Tech's dean advised against it. We have donors who are watching this closely, she warned. Be careful what you associate yourself with, Everett. But Holmes didn't blink. They already erased 1 child, he said. They're not erasing me. The courtroom was packed. Civil rights attorneys, journalists, parents. Elijah sat in the gallery, tucked between Monique and Darren, his small fingers wrapped around the same pencil he'd used to solve the Olympiad question that had ignited everything. Dr. Holmes took the stand. Gray-bearded, soft-spoken, and precise, he began with a math lesson. The problem Elijah solved is unsolved, only because it requires lateral insight, not brute force. It's not designed for age. It's designed for elegance. And he saw the elegance. The opposing attorney cut in. Professor, are you saying an 8-year-old did what most doctoral candidates cannot? Holmes smiled. No, I'm saying he did what most doctoral candidates aren't trained to do. He thought sideways. He paused, then pulled out a printed copy of Elijah's answer. This, he said, holding it high, is not memorized. It's not coached. It's not fraudulent. It's genius. Then he dropped the bomb. I was one of the original reviewers. I voted to certify his win. So did 2 others. Where's the record? The attorney asked. Holmes reached into his briefcase.
This is the original vote sheet, the one I was asked to destroy.
Gasps rippled through the room. Holmes handed the document to the judge, then turned to the gallery. The truth isn't complicated. It's just inconvenient. Elijah won. They were just too afraid to let him be seen. The impact was immediate. National media erupted. The Olympiad Committee was placed under federal injunction. Havers resigned from all public positions. An emergency motion was filed to reinstate Elijah's official record. But more importantly, something shifted in Elijah. After weeks of trauma, silence, and emotional fatigue, he turned to his father after the hearing and said, Do I still have to prove I belong? Darren hugged him. No. They just proved you never didn't. That night, Holmes returned to his office. Waiting on his desk was a typed note. Unsigned. They won't forget this. You're not tenured here anymore. But thank you. The next morning, his university placed him on administrative leave. Officially, it was for violating confidentiality policies. Unofficially, he was a martyr now. But as he packed his books, a knock came at the door. It was Naomi. "I have something for you," she said. She handed him a card. Inside, a handwritten note from Elijah. "Thank you for seeing my math, for making it matter. I'll never forget it." Holmes held the card to his chest. "I think I found my next equation," he whispered. Naomi smiled. "What's that?" He looked up. How to build a system that doesn't need secrets to see children. That same night, Elijah stood at a whiteboard in his room, drawing circles and lines. When Darren asked what he was doing, he replied softly, "Designing my own school." He had 60 seconds to solve a live problem in front of millions. The whiteboard in Elijah's room was covered in circles, arrows, and floating symbols. Not math problems, at least not in the traditional sense. It was a diagram of possibility. Across the top he'd written, "What if no one gets to decide who's smart?" Darren stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. "What are you building?" he asked softly. Elijah didn't look up. "A school." Darren raised an eyebrow. "For who?" "For kids like me," Elijah replied. "Kids who didn't get picked, or clapped for, or believed." Darren stepped closer. "You serious about this?" Elijah finally turned. "They used numbers to erase me. I'm going to use numbers to make something no one can delete." The next morning, Naomi's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from the executive producer of The Truth Table, a nationally syndicated show known for tackling political scandal, viral cases, and controversial reckonings. Their segments often pulled in millions of viewers. The message was brief. "We want Elijah. Live. One problem. 1 minute. Let America decide." Naomi forwarded it to Darren. His reply was just 2 words. "Let's talk." There were risks. Performing under pressure. Sensationalizing a child's trauma. Feeding the media machine that had already tried to consume him. But there was also power in letting Elijah reclaim the moment. Monique hesitated. "They'll be waiting for him to fail." "Let them," Darren said. "He's not doing this for applause. He's doing this because they turned his genius into a scandal. This time, it's on his terms." Elijah listened silently. Then he nodded. "I want them to see what they tried to erase." The night before the broadcast, Elijah barely slept. He didn't rehearse formulas, didn't pull out old workbooks. Instead, he asked Naomi to show him the original Olympiad challenge again. The one he solved in 10 seconds. The one that started it all. He read it quietly, then wrote underneath, "They said this was too much."
They never asked how I saw it.
Monique knelt beside him. "What do you see when you read it?" Elijah whispered, "I don't see numbers. I see patterns, like music. I don't solve, I listen." The studio was packed. 3 cameras. A studio audience of journalists, educators, and invited families. 1 digital timer. And a glass whiteboard center stage, backlit and glowing. Elijah sat backstage, legs swinging, not from nerves but rhythm. He stared ahead, calm. The host walked over, a former academic, now a public intellectual known for hard questions and harder truths. He knelt beside Elijah. "You ready, champ?" Elijah looked at him. "I'm not here to win anything," he said. "I'm here to be heard." The host nodded. "Then let's turn the mic all the way up." The broadcast opened with a montage. Clips of Elijah at different points in the story. Solving problems in his living room. Sitting silently in a police cruiser. Testifying before Congress. Then the narrator asked, "What happens when a system built to measure genius decides that genius showed up in the wrong body?" The screen cut to the live stage. The host stepped forward. "Tonight, in front of a live audience and millions at home, we revisit the challenge that was declared unsolvable, then declared invalid, then denied altogether." The audience murmured. He gestured to the screen behind him. A digital rendering of the original Olympiad problem appeared. Then the host turned. "And here is the boy who saw the answer before most even understood the question." Elijah walked on stage. The room held its breath. He stood in front of the glass board. No notes, no calculator, just a marker. The host looked at the timer. "You have 60 seconds. Ready?" Elijah nodded once. The countdown began. 60. He scanned the problem. View 2. He closed his eyes. 43. He began writing, not numbers first, but symbols, arcs, conversions, shortcuts only familiar to the deeply studied. B1. He flipped the logic backward, then forward again. 2. He rewrote the equation using base substitution. So sinks to a pause, then a pivot. 12. He circled one line. 8. 7. Final expression. Equal sign.
3,
2. He stepped back. The timer hit 0. Silence. Then, slowly, the board lit green. Correct. The room exploded, not with applause alone, but with awe. The host stepped forward. Can you explain what you just did? Elijah turned to the audience. I stopped solving like a test and started solving like me. The clip went viral before the segment even ended. Elijah Explains trended worldwide. But more important than the numbers were the letters. Thousands of them. From parents, from kids, from teachers. I never knew math could feel like music. My daughter says she wants to build a school too. I used to think I was dumb. Now I think maybe they just didn't understand me. Elijah read them all, then looked at Darren and said, now I know what I want to build. The next morning, Elijah launched a website. The homepage read, coming soon, the Rucker Institute. A school where brilliance doesn't need permission. And the first student to apply was Talia Reid. What the board said behind closed doors changed public opinion overnight. The application from Talia Reid came in just after midnight. The message attached was short, typed in lowercase. I never thought a school like this could exist. Thank you for not waiting for someone else to build it. Elijah read the words in silence, then whispered. She never stopped trying either. The Rucker Institute wasn't even live yet, but the idea had already become movement. Naomi watched the analytics on the new website spike into the tens of thousands. Visits from every state, emails from parents of children who'd been called too fast, too much, or too intense for traditional classrooms. But just as the attention crested into hope, a file dropped that flipped the entire conversation. An anonymous upload appeared on a decentralized video platform, titled, BOE, Closed Session, Ridgebury District, March. At first it appeared to be a standard meeting recording, but then the content turned unmistakably damning. The camera was grainy, the room dimly lit, but the voices, clear, recognizable, and very real. Board Member 1. Look, this kid's got heat. We can't ignore it anymore. Board Member 2. It doesn't matter how good he is. If we validate him, we invalidate the whole structure. Board Member 3. His parents are building momentum. It's dangerous. Board Member 1. So what do we do? Board Member 2. Stall. Drown it in policy. Launch a review panel. Say we're looking into everything. If we drag it out long enough, the hype dies. Board Member 3. He's not the problem. It's what he represents. Board Member 1. You mean the idea that a black kid could outperform our golden boys? Board Member 2. I mean the idea that our judgment is broken. Then a pause, followed by a final line. If we start awarding genius based on facts instead of familiarity, we lose control of the narrative. Within hours, the video exploded across every platform. It wasn't just trending. It became a mirror. One user wrote, "This isn't about one kid. This is about every gatekeeper who kept us out and smiled while doing it." Another, "The scariest part isn't what they said. It's how calm they were saying it." The backlash was swift. Parents flooded school board hotlines. Educators resigned en masse. Universities pulled partnership funding from Ridgebury. Protests erupted outside school buildings, with signs that read, "Genius is not a privilege. We heard you. You can't unsee this." But the most powerful voice came from within the system. Dr. Holmes, the same math professor who had testified on Elijah's behalf, released a statement on his personal blog. These are not isolated incidents. These are institutional reflexes. The tape didn't just reveal a bias. It revealed a blueprint. And now we all have a choice: defend the system or redefine the standard. Monique watched the flood of media from her kitchen table, arms crossed. They said it, out loud. On tape, she said. Darren sat beside her. They said what we already knew. Elijah leaned on the counter. "Do I have to go back to school there?" "No," Monique said firmly. "You're not going back to a system that needs you quiet to stay stable." Darren added, "We've already started building our own." But then came the twist. An emergency board meeting was called, live streamed under public pressure. New members were temporarily seated. Community members testified. Parents, students, even former Ridgebury teachers. Then the interim board chair read a public resolution. The Ridgebury Board of Education formally acknowledges the unjust suppression of Elijah Rucker's academic achievements. We reinstate his Olympiad victory. We recognize his rightful placement in advanced gifted networks. And we offer a public apology to the Rucker family. It was meant to be closure, but it wasn't justice. Not to Elijah. Not yet. So when the board offered a symbolic trophy in a media ceremony, the same one he should have received months ago, Elijah stepped forward, looked at the polished metal base, then said, "I don't want the..." Gasps. He turned to the cameras. "I wanted to win because I earned it. But now that you believe me because you're embarrassed, not because I was right, this trophy means nothing." He placed it on the table. "I already won. That's why you were scared." Then he walked away. And the world followed him. That same night, the Rucker Institute received a donation. Anonymous. 7 figures. The note attached said, "Don't just expose the system, replace it." He didn't just win. He made sure the next kid like him never gets erased again. The donation came without fanfare. No name. No foundation. Just a wire transfer marked, "Initial funding, Rucker Institute." The sum? $3,000. Attached was a single sentence. "Don't just expose the system, replace it." Darren stared at the numbers on the screen. It didn't feel real. Monique read the note twice, then looked at her son. Elijah was sitting on the floor, quietly building a model out of paper and tape, constructing what looked like a school. "Who do you think sent it?" Darren asked. Elijah didn't look up. "Someone who needed the school before I built it." In just 8 months, the Rucker Institute went from concept to reality. Not a traditional school, but a hybrid think tank, academy and innovation lab, designed for children who didn't fit neatly inside boxes built by other people's fears.
No age gates.
No IQ thresholds. No behavioral fit screenings. The only requirement: curiosity. Each classroom was named after a student who'd been disqualified, discouraged, or erased. The Talia Room, the Jamir Wing, the Reed Lab, and at the center, the Elijah Hall. A glass-walled auditorium where problems weren't solved for points but for purpose. Opening day wasn't quiet. The media swarmed, protesters gathered, pundits speculated. But inside the building, 25 children, black, brown, neurodivergent, poor, skipped over, took their seats and looked around like they'd just stepped into a world that believed in them before asking them to prove anything. Talia Reed, now 16, was the first to speak in orientation. "I spent years thinking I needed to sound a certain way to be taken seriously. But here I get to be brilliant and black without apologizing for either." The room erupted. For once not in defense,
but in defiance.
A year later, the Rucker Institute hosted its first annual summit, Genius Unfiltered. It wasn't a science fair. It was a showcase of original thought open to the public, streamed live, designed to spotlight young minds who had once been ignored. Elijah, now 9, was the keynote speaker. The same cameras that had once captured him in handcuffs now panned across a massive stage, with his name written in clean, bold letters. He walked up to the mic. No teleprompter, no script, just a quiet confidence. He looked out at the crowd. "I used to think the world needed to believe in me for me to do something great," he began. "But then I realized, the moment I believed in myself, they couldn't stop me anymore." He paused. "Everything they said I was doing wrong, speaking too fast, thinking too differently, loving math too deeply, those were never flaws. They were signs. Signs that I didn't need their lanes." The room was still. I built my own highway. Applause thundered. It lasted over a minute. But Elijah raised a hand, and it stopped. "Before I finish, I want to ask you a question." He walked over to a whiteboard and wrote in big, clear letters, "What genius have you erased, just because they didn't look the way you expected?" The silence that followed was not empty. It was loaded, personal, civic, national. He nodded. "Fix your mirrors." Then he stepped away. The clip aired on every major news network. Politicians tweeted it. University leaders quoted it. Parents everywhere began looking at their children differently, not for how well they conformed, but for how bravely they diverged. And at Ridgebury, the silence was deafening. Months later, Elijah was invited back to Ridgebury, not as a student, but as a guest speaker. He declined. Instead, he sent a short letter. "When I asked for a trophy, you gave me a test. When I asked for a chance, you gave me suspicion. When I gave you brilliance, you gave me silence. And when I built my own stage, you finally listened. I don't need your microphone. I have my own. One afternoon, Elijah received a small box in the mail. Inside, the original Olympiad trophy, mailed quietly, without ceremony. He brought it to class the next day. His students gathered around. He placed the trophy on the floor, then took a hammer and broke it. The room gasped. Then he spoke. This was never the prize. He pointed around the room. That night, Naomi sat at her desk reflecting on 2 years of relentless reporting. She began writing her final piece. The title, The Boy Who Solved the Equation They Called Impossible, and then solved the system that said he couldn't. In it she wrote, Elijah Rucker didn't just reclaim his name. He redefined genius. He reminded the world that intelligence doesn't need a gate. It needs room. He didn't just win. He made sure the next kid wouldn't have to fight this hard to be seen. The final twist? A district 2 states away tried to launch its own Rucker-style academy without crediting him. Elijah sent them a cease and desist, then sent them something else. A scholarship, signed, for the kid whose light you almost dimmed. May they find it brighter than you ever imagined. On the 2nd anniversary of his erasure, Elijah returned to Maple Crest Park. Same bench, same field. Only this time he wasn't alone. Hundreds of students, teachers, and parents stood in silence as Elijah knelt, drew a circle in the dirt, and wrote 3 words inside. Start your own. Then he looked up and smiled. That's the real answer. If you've ever been told to quiet down, dim your light, or wait your turn, just to make others more comfortable, then you know this story isn't just about Elijah. It's about all of us who were underestimated before we were even seen. Type yes if you believe brilliance should never need permission. Subscribe if this broke your heart and opened your eyes.